All right, so thanks everyone for jumping on the STR Masterclass today. Before we get started, I just wanted to give you guys a quick overview on what I'd like to accomplish. Definitely, I've got kind of two main objectives today, and hopefully your expectations are along the same vein. I want to be able to, after this webinar, have you guys have a clear understanding of the different short-term rental strategy options and what's involved with each of those. So we're going to do a deep dive on the three different strategies that you can employ using the short-term rental model. Secondly, and equally as important, once you have a good understanding of the different strategies, the very next step is to basically be able to confidently conduct a short-term rental market analysis to have a good understanding of what the potential revenue is. That is definitely something that you want to have confidence in as you make a decision to either buy and invest in a property and or do a long-term lease, as well as actually managing units for other investors. And so basically, we're going to kind of do a deep dive on that. So the takeaway today should be you should be able to have a good understanding of the three different options. Also kind of help you decide for yourself what direction you might want to go. And then also have the ability on your own and understand what tools to use to do the market analysis. And then the last thing I'll cover as well, we're going to kind of give you some options on the B&B investing program in terms of more details about how we work with investors and we help them build a scalable business. And so that's the third option that we'll kind of talk about later on. So what I'd like to do as I kind of go through each one of the strategies and in the beginning here, feel free to throw in the Q&A box any questions as you're thinking about them. And I will try to get to those towards the end of each strategy section. And then when we dig into the market analysis, it'll be a little bit more of an open format. We're going to actually look at some examples of properties that you guys might actually have in your portfolio or properties that you're looking at as a prospect so that we can actually look at real live examples to do our market analysis. So with that being said, I'm going to kind of jump right into the short-term rental strategies and kind of walk us through what those different options are. And just on as a summary to start with, the acquisition model is definitely an option. If you're already buying real estate for your fix and flip business, these are just kind of some of the basic requirements that are needed for the acquisition model. You definitely need to kind of acquire financing. We're going to look at some of those options. You can obviously purchase distressed and rehab, kind of get into the property with equity already, or you can purchase as a retail purchase. Property's already up and running, ready to go. You also definitely need to account for the additional dollars that you're going to need for staging and setup. So the acquisitions model, that's kind of like a high-level overview. We're going to do a deep dive here in just a second on it. High-level overview of the master lease. You're basically going to be looking for and talking with landlord owners of properties and making it crystal clear with them that you're going to be doing the short-term rental strategy. You're going to need, startup money for the first month's rent and a deposit. And you're obviously going to need money to stage and set up the property. The larger the property, obviously, the higher that dollar amount is going to be. We're going to kind of go over what those different numbers look like as far as estimates. We're also going to look at some funding options on how to kind of cover some of those expenses in the beginning. At a minimum, the master lease strategy, I've done multiple master leases and rental arbitrage deals, and I've never used my personal credit score. It's always been in a corporate name, as a business entity. And so you still are going to need to have at a minimum some sort of a rental history that you can provide as references. And even better if you actually have some company credit history to start with as well. And so we'll talk about that in some detail. So the third option is to actually manage properties for other investors. And so obviously, in order to kind of pursue this one right off the first tee, you got to have some experience initially, right, in terms of already doing the short-term rental management and hosting properties and have some understanding of how it works. Preferably having properties of your own that you're doing that for to then be able to offer it to other investors. And so high level summary, you're going to need, $250 to $500 as a marketing budget. There is some advertising outlets that you can go to. A lot of it is kind of word of mouth, attending real estate networking events, looking for investors that might need help with providing options on their property that are already doing long-term rentals, for example. And you have various different income opportunities as a property manager for short-term rentals. You can actually charge investors for running the market analysis, which I'm going to show you guys how to do. And then you can also charge for staging properties as well. So besides making a management fee, which is typically going to be in the 20 to 25% range, you're also going to be able to have other income opportunities with managing properties. So the other thing, you can obviously do is there's a lot of folks that are kind of relocating or moving properties and they're looking at different options. So those are other ways to reach out to family and friends. They may have actual properties that might be good candidates for the short-term rental model. And you don't necessarily need any credit here or good credit or you're not typically going to be doing too much financing that's going to be needed here because you're basically relying on the investor client that you are going to work for basically to manage their property. So it's not going to be any financing on your side to get this particular option started, which is kind of a benefit, obviously, because you're not really cutting out of pocket at all, but you're able to kind of tap into monthly income. So it's a good option for that. So here's just kind of a high level difference on a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom property as an example. If you were to do an acquisition, what your potential income may look like, as well as what the master lease income and if you were managing. And so obviously acquisitions, you own the property, you've got a monthly loan you're going to have to pay. You're going to need to be responsible for the monthly utility bills, typically electricity, internet, water, pest control, landscaping. If there's a pool, obviously servicing for the pool, all those expenses need to be factored in. And then, of course, in this 1-bedroom, 1-bath example, if your gross short-term rental revenue is around $2,800, then your income potential in the acquisition strategy is going to be around $1,640. You're also going to have along the way with the acquisitions of the property, obviously being able to build up equity over time and have ownership and the option later to sell that property and obviously take advantage of the profit potential based on the equity buildup. Master lease strategy, you're going to have a monthly lease payment, $1,400. You're also going to be responsible for the expenses that keep that property up and running. And so at a $1,400 master lease amount, your utilities and everything is going to get you around $1,600 as your total expenses. And so on that same short-term rental revenue, if you're at $2,800 in short-term rental income, then your net profit on your master lease is going to be around $1,140. Now, obviously on management, you don't have a loan in place, you don't have a lease you're responsible for. All of the utilities and the monthly expenses are the responsibility of the owner of the property. And essentially, it's their responsibility for those expenses, also including the startup expenses, right? So staging and setting up the property, that's going to be coming out of the investor's pocket, not yours. And so right out of the gate, once the property has been set up and staged and you're ready to actually manage the property, you essentially are able to earn 25% of the monthly revenue. So $2,800 in the same example, you're going to generate around $700 a month in that example. Now, obviously, these are conservative numbers. We do have one bedroom, one bath that perform higher than these numbers, usually in the $3,000 to $3,500 range. So you could, obviously do the math. Your income potential could be that much more. One thing to point out and to remind everybody, obviously with a long-term rental, you've got consistent monthly rental income. With short-term rental revenue, it is always a moving target. Each month is going to be different. And so that 2,800 is kind of an average over a 12-month window. Some months you might be at 3,200, some months you might be at 2,200, and so on. And so just keep that in mind. You're not hanging your hat on a consistent number. You just want to be comfortable that you have a good understanding of where that number is going to end up, so that you can kind of be able to know that it shouldn't be any lower than that on an average basis. So as you're looking at these different options, it's important to know, as you're putting together your goals and your objectives and your planning with this model, is knowing what the potential monthly income is, right? And so if you obviously are going after a master lease strategy, and let's say your revenue goals are 10,000 a month in monthly revenue that you would like to get consistently, on a one bedroom, one bath model, it's safe to estimate around 10 properties. I would say around 8 to 10 properties under a master lease strategy to get to that $10,000 a month as a revenue goal. Management strategy, if you need to get to that $10,000 number, then you're going to need to be a little bit more, maybe 12 to 15 properties under management. And then obviously under acquisitions, you would have to come out with a lower, you're probably talking about 5 or 6 or 7 properties to get to that 10,000 per month revenue goal. So just wanted to point that out so that you have kind of a baseline of not only the options, but also what the economic differences are. So here are some of the pros and cons of the 3 different strategies, right? And so obviously with acquisitions, as you've seen previously, it's a higher net cash flow. You build equity over time. You've got full control. There's no other decision maker but you. And essentially, as a result of that, the cons, you're basically the one ultimately financially responsible as well. So you need the liquid cash, you need good credit typically, and you need time if you're going to be doing the rehab, if you're doing buying distressed as an option, which is always good because you kind of get in at a lower cost basis. But that's work, right? That's time. So that takes additional time to rehab a property, usually 6 to 8 months, maybe longer, depending on the project. And so those are one of the cons for acquisitions. Master lease strategy, the pros, you can start with, little cash or not a whole lot of cash. You can kind of use a lot of credit lines and other things that we're going to talk about to get started. You can scale very quickly with the master lease strategy. And so, we can definitely add multiple units very quickly. We've done as many as 8 to 10 units within a 30 to 45-day window. And so that's one of the things we kind of prepare our clients with, is knowing how to scale quickly, because once you engage with sophisticated landlords and building owners, and you develop that relationship with them, and they see the benefit in working with you. I had a 22 unit building, for example, that had, they were coming up to refinance. They had these were brand new units, been recently rehabbed. And they had basically 8 units sitting vacant because they were having a hard time getting long-term tenants. And so we were already doing about 2 different units in one of the buildings for them. And so we basically strategically set up 8 units very quickly for them so that they were able to get the refinance done to show a higher occupancy level. And so that's an example of being prepared and being available to take advantage of that. So almost immediately, your 8 units Obviously, there's heavy lifting involved, setting up the units, getting them started. But once you're past that initial 30 to 45 days, you're now cash flowing on 8 units pretty quickly. You do have moderate control with a master lease strategy, especially if you are engaging with a landlord. Most of the time, the landlord doesn't want to have anything to do with the short-term rental operation. The most important thing is that they clearly understand and you have it clearly defined in your lease and what they're responsible for and what you're responsible for. Obviously, like any lease, any major issues that come up, they're going to need to step in and take care of those major issues. But any minor issues along the way, you're going to want to be able to have control over that. And so that's one of the benefits of doing it that way. Now, the cons with the master lease strategy, obviously, is there's no equity. You're not building equity over time. You don't own the property. Somebody else owns it. You could be, like I mentioned before, because of the ebbs and flows with the market and occupancy levels, you could be either upside down or break even certain months. And so you're going to have to take a reserve in the beginning to make sure that you can account for any issues that come up along the way. Now, thankfully, we haven't had any major kind of gaps other than obviously what happened during COVID, where we had within a 2-month process, we had all of our bookings canceled. And so thankfully at the time, I think we had something like 60 properties that we had master leases on. Obviously, when it's in a severe situation like that, the landlords worked with us. We deferred some of the lease payments due to a lot of cancellations. And thankfully, things picked up pretty quickly after that. But that's an extreme example. I don't think you're going to see any situation, hopefully, going forward where you have 2 or 3 months of just no bookings at all. But you do want to account a reserve to kind of handle for that. The other con is you are dependent upon the landlord, so it's important to develop a good relationship in the beginning, and again, make sure that they are a landlord that cares about the property and is going to step up when required and when needed. If you've got a leak in the property, if the AC needs a major overhaul, if the landlord drags their feet in getting that done, it's going to directly impact your rental income. And so that is kind of a little bit of a con. Obviously, in an acquisition process, you're the one that has full control over that in terms of getting things done for maintenance and any major issues. And so master leases, you've got a little bit of a less control over that. Management pros, we've talked a little bit about this. So you can start with little or no money. You can scale quickly. It's a sellable business. Now, monthly net cash flow of revenue, if you build up your management company, there are larger short-term rental specialized companies that are buying smaller local property managers that have, in some cases, maybe 40 or 50 properties, in a lot of cases, 100 or 200 properties. And so if you can think about the math that we did based on a 10-unit example, if you're managing 100 properties, which is very doable in this business in terms of being able to scale to that level, you now have an organization that's basically saleable as an exit strategy. And so some management companies over 3 to 5 years will build up their client base to that level from a revenue standpoint and be able to get 3, 4, 5 multiples on their net income once they've built that organization up. So that's another potential goal that you could have, or kind of another benefit in growing your management side of the business. Now, the cons here, you're basically having to support not only the guests and hospitality and hosting the short-term rental situation, but you're also needing to be there to support the clients. And so you're going to have responsibilities to send the client a monthly report showing them the activity of the reservations, along with the less all the expenses, along with the ACH payment for that owner to receive for the activity that's happened that month. Also, anything that comes up, if the client has any questions or if their bookings are slower than usual, you've got to have an interaction with that client. And so, you've got to be prepared for that. One of the things you want to look out for is, it's hard to do this in the beginning. Honestly, I think I went through probably my first, I would say probably close to 100 clients where um, if they had a pulse, they had a property, the property was profitable, they needed somebody to manage, I added them into the operation. Now, you can learn very quickly that you can start to be a lot more selective. Some clients are a little bit harder to work with than others. And so you don't want to have, those problem clients that want to micromanage you or that are spending a lot of your time answering questions and things of that nature. So you can and you should kind of be a little bit more selective, so that you are engaging with clients that recognize the value that you bring to the table and your expertise, and essentially rely on you to basically manage the property and don't spend too much of your time either them trying to learn the business or other things. The other thing too, if you're going after the management strategy, you want to continuously be prospecting, adding new clients, and being able to have that growth pattern as a goal. And so that's very easy to do once you get up and running. There is some work involved, obviously, even as the manager. If you're taking on staging and setting up the property, that's usually a 2 to 3 week process. So, you typically don't want to bring on more than 1 or 2 clients every 30 days or so. So you can still grow pretty quickly that way by doing that. But you don't want to overwhelm yourself where you're having to do too many properties to get onboarded and having mistakes happen. Now, the other kind of negative with management is you've got limited control, right? So the other thing when you're qualifying these clients is you don't want to get engaged with an investor that doesn't want to invest in their property. They don't see the importance of making improvements and maintaining the property. And so that could definitely impact directly bad reviews and not being able to generate good revenue. So you definitely don't want to, you want to be able to kind of limit that. And so you don't have full control as a manager, but you do have the ability to basically manage the entire process. Essentially, when you do these management arrangements, you're basically doing everything from managing the cleaning operation, managing maintenance, the revenue management, handling the listing, guest communications, hospitality. So you are basically in full control of the process. But what you're limited in control in is the decisioning as it comes to the maintenance and upkeep of the property. And so that piece is kind of, in some cases, might tie your hands to it. Now, one of the big advantages. Now, obviously, I recommend our clients that are starting out that they choose one strategy to begin with. Now, usually it's better to get focused and make a decision to choose one of the 3 strategies. But ultimately, I think over time, as you get your units set up and let's say you've got 3 or 4 or 5 units set up in that particular strategy, I think it's perfectly fine at that point. Once you've got those units set up, they're up and running, they're generating revenue, you've got them in your process to then look at adding additional strategies. And so over time, I've been able to basically employ all 3 of these strategies. We still do that in our business today. The benefit of this is your short-term rental operation, your listing platform, your channel manager, your price optimization tool, all of the things that you use to automate and run your business can be employed for any of the 3 strategies. So it doesn't really matter whether you're managing, whether you own the property or you're leasing the property, your short-term rental process and operation for everything that's involved with the business will be handled the same way. And so that's what allows you to scale the business. And so as you add your units, you can basically throw them into the same operational process that can basically help you streamline things, make your life easier. The whole objective here is to have you be able to step away and have a lot of the automated processes. There's things that you can delegate a lot of the day-to-day operation to your teams. And we kind of show you how to do that to be able to scale the business so that you're not the one working in the business. So there is heavy lifting, make no mistake about it, in the beginning when you get started. And so in the beginning, you do have obviously the time and effort involved with setting up the units, staging the units, getting the listing up and running, laying the groundwork to get your good reviews so you can get off to a good start to generate revenue. But once you've done that heavy lifting in the beginning, that first 30 days, you're somewhat on autopilot. You can have that listing in your process, and now you can go on to the next one that you want to add and be able to continue to build your portfolio. So what I'm going to do at this point, I am going to see if anybody has any questions. If you do, please throw them in the Q&A section for me. And while you're doing that, I am going to switch over and kind of go into a lot more detail here on each of the things we've been talking about. So like I spoke about in the beginning, we want to do short-term rental strategies. We want to do the short-term rental market analysis, and then we're going to talk about the B&B investing program. So don't feel obligated to take notes here. I'm going to make this document available to you at the end of the webinar. And so you can take notes, obviously, for things that we touch on that aren't necessarily going to be typed on here. But is everybody able to see my screen here? Now that I've switched it. I want to make sure that I'm not still on the other screen. So if somebody could just give me a yes in the Q&A area. All right, perfect. Thank you, David. All right, so let's see. You answered part of my question already about where to start with one. Which is best to ideally start with if I'm new to all of this? That is the most fruitful getting out of the gate. Okay, that's a good question. And so I'm gonna kind of walk through in a little bit more detail each of the three strategies to help you get a better understanding of which one of the three options might be more ideal for you to start, because we're gonna peel back the onion here and kind of give some more details on what's involved with each of the strategies. But I would say if you're brand new to this, which I was in the beginning, I was brand new, obviously, when I started with the short-term rental model. And even though I was very experienced in real estate, I had probably 350 acquisitions under my belt. Most of those deals we wholesaled and sold to other investors. I also had done about, at that point, probably 20 to 25 fix and flips. Even though I had, like most of you guys, we each have our own independent experience in real estate, but I knew nothing about short-term rentals. And so for me, one of the best ways that I was able to get started, even though I already had properties I owned that I could have done short-term rentals with, I actually started with the master lease strategy. And when you basically are starting from scratch, you've got your very first property, you're doing it as a lease. You can do it as a one bedroom, or you can do larger properties. Usually, obviously, 1 or 2 bedrooms are typically better to start with as your first one. But ideally, to get started, and if you're new to all of it, that's one option. The second option is, frankly, we have a lot of students that will start with a room in their house, right? You can actually create your short-term rental Airbnb listing. You can understand some of the tools that are involved in the process by simply renting out a room in your house, or alternatively, renting out your current property if you are out of town, or if you are traveling, or if you go stay with a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a spouse somewhere else, right? So you can literally get up and running by using an existing property. Some of us have properties that might have a basement in it with a separate entrance. That is a quick and easy way. We've had a lot of our clients that have done that, where they've had a basement, separate entrance. They did a little like mini KitchenAid area in the basement, and very quickly through the program, you can stage and set it up, walk through the details on how to set up the property, and you can be generating revenue on your basement property to get to learn the process. And then as you get comfortable, you can actually go and do your acquisition strategy or your management strategy or your master lease strategy. So we'll dig into some more details here on that. So that's a great question. But that's kind of my initial feedback on that particular, what's the best ideally way to start if you're all new to this. So good question. So also another question, how to find the first ideal master lease landlord, which you may answer later. Yeah, so we're going to go into some detail on that. So let me hold off on that one as well. So if there aren't any other questions, we're going to have an opportunity to go over some Q&A again. What I'd like to do is I'm going to go through in a little bit more detail on each of the three strategies, and what we'll do is we'll do kind of a Q&A after each of the three strategies. So like we talked about acquisitions, we're going to kind of go through the acquisitions first, right? And so one of the things under acquisitions is, what are your funding options? All right. And so you can obviously get a hard money loan as an investor. And there's actually opportunities right now that I've actually employed. There are, even in this high interest rate environment, there are hard money lenders that are doing 100% financing. Now, typically, they are usually doing this for experienced investors. So if you've already done some rehabs, I think some of them might have a requirement where you have, call it at least 2 to 3 rehabs under your belt. So if you've got some experience with rehabbing, some of these short-term, and your numbers on your deal are basically in the right manner based on the 70% of ARV, including your repair costs, as long as those numbers look good, and you've got experience, you can technically get a hard money loan for 100% of the funding. Now, what I've done on a recent deal is I've also included a private money loan, even though I'm getting 90 to 100% financing from the hard money lender. I'm getting a private money loan to do my carrying cost, right? Your float for your rehab. So even though your hard money loan is giving you 100%, they're not going to fund your rehab portion of the project until you are completed with each section, right? So you get your flooring done, you get all your interior paint done. You've got to be able to front and pay your contractors to get that work started before you can do a draw request from the lender. So even though they're financing technically all of your rehab expenses in most cases on your rehab project, you're going to need cash available. In a lot of cases, that cash could be $10 to $15 to $20,000. Your contractor needs money to get a deposit to get the materials to get started on the project. So you can still situate it where if you have a private money lender, that you have your carrying costs, because your hard money loan, you're going to have a monthly interest payment involved with that, usually 10 to 12% interest right out of the gate. So you've got to pay that each month. You've got to do your float for the rehab costs, like we've talked about. You're also, as you get the rehab project done, you're going to need money for staging the property, right? And so you can get your private money lender involved, and usually around the same 8 to 10% interest cost. Your private money lender can kind of cover those expenses for you. You can also waive the carrot if this is going to be obviously a short-term rental and you're going to be generating short-term rental revenue, that you can give the private money lender like a preferred return plus a profit share as a part of the deal. But what it does, you're now basically offloading the financial expense of doing an acquisition on these different partners. Now, obviously, all this costs money. There's a return that these lenders are expecting. And so you always look at a rehab project where you've got a lender as a partner. Your contractor is going to be your other partner because you're getting a big chunk of the money that's involved in the deal. And then you're obviously the third partner, right? So you can structure those transactions such that you're basically going to be the one managing the project and overseeing everything, and you're basically able to take your part of the deal as a result of that. So that's just one example. You can obviously also purchase these based on a DSCR loan. And so a lot of these same lenders will provide a DSCR loan that basically gives you the ability to qualify for that purchase price based on how much money that short-term rental is going to generate in revenue. And so this is kind of looking at the debt service compared to your monthly expenses versus looking at your income or your FICO score as a qualifier. There are also lenders that specialize in lending for short-term rental purchasing. And so we have various options of those types of lenders. Basically, historically, most lenders, when you go to refinance out of your hard money loan, you're basically going to use it as a rental income. Historically, financial companies, banks, they are perfectly fine looking at long-term rents as projected revenue to give you financing to refinance your loan. Now, we're going to talk about the refinance in a minute, but these short-term rental lenders will actually they'll give you credit for 70% of the short-term rental revenue, right? So they're still giving you a haircut, but 70% of the short-term rental revenue is still going to be way more than what it would be as a long-term rental. So they're going to qualify your loan and your financing based on that short-term rental revenue or 70% of it, which gives you, a pretty good spot to be in terms of being able to qualify. So you can either buy the property retail right out of the gate and be able to do it with a short-term rental lender, or you can do it with a DSCR loan instead of doing the hard money loan. So what that does is it gets you right away into a 30-year or 15-year loan, and you can be off to the races generating your short-term rental revenue. If you do the rehab, obviously, you're going to do that first 6 to 12 months as a hard money loan. Maybe you have a second position private money loan. But the whole objective here is to ultimately be able to refinance out of that into a longer-term loan in your acquisition strategy. Now, the other option for acquisitions, and given the current environment as a real estate investor, and here goes my spelling, seller financing or creative financing is a good way to basically acquire a property where you're not having to deal with a bank. You deal with the seller of the property. There are a lot of older folks that are retiring or downsizing or, probate situations where you can set up a seller financing opportunity to buy the property and come up with some sort of a down payment in some cases, or not at all, depending on what you can negotiate. So you can still do, seller financing. Another big thing, a lot of deals are out there right now that we are looking at and that some of our students are looking at, are subject to loans, right? And so let me know if this is too big, because subject to loans, right? So the interest rates are still, even though we just had an interest rate deduct, interest rates are still in the 6-7% range, maybe a little bit lower than that. So you can pick up properties that are subject to the existing mortgage where you're looking at, anywhere from 3 to 5% as an interest rate. You're still going to need probably a down payment to buy out their equity of anywhere from 30 to 50,000. But all of a sudden you're now in a property without dealing with a bank. You're going to take over their existing mortgage and their existing mortgage payments. And this is an attractive option because you are inheriting that lower monthly mortgage payment that's lower than what it would be if you were to get a brand new loan, right? And so it's definitely an attractive option for acquisitions. So once you've kind of done this, right, whether you're doing hard money or subject to or seller financing, there's always the option later to refinance out of that loan. You can do, 75 to 80% of ARV, right? So on your refinance, you can actually pull out cash. So let's say you do a rehab and you've basically finished the rehab, the property's fully up and running, fully remodeled, and now your ARV is, let's say you bought the property for 100 and you put 50,000 in it as a rehab. And just to keep the numbers easy, let's say your $200,000 is your ARV, right? So now you can do a refinance and you can do 80% of 200,000, which is 160. So now you can pay off your hard money loan, your private money lender, and you've got $10,000 or $15,000 in cash that you can pull out. You can use that cash towards staging the property or investing in another property. So that's another good way to kind of continue to scale under acquisitions, is by doing a refinance at a lower interest rate. Now, obviously, hopefully the rates start to stabilize and come down to where that's a good option for you after you come out of your hard money loan. So those are kind of all the ebbs and flows of the funding options within acquisitions. Now, I want to talk about some of the market advantages by doing acquisitions, okay? And what I mean by that. So with the short-term rental model, as you know, investors that are actually out there buying rehab projects, traditionally, a lot of times they stay away from two-bedroom houses, as an example. But because what happens is, from a rehabber's perspective, when you're doing fix and flipping, you're basically, your objective here is to do a retail sale. You want to fix up the property, buy it distressed, fix it up, and then sell it on the retail market. There's not many families that are buying even their starter homes, that are looking for two-bedroom houses. So when you're looking at distressed and properties that needing rehabbing, usually the two bedrooms get overlooked by investors, or not necessarily overlooked. They're not as in high demand. If they do, as an investor, if you do look at a two-bedroom, you're typically going to want to add on a third bedroom, right? Or you're going to make it a larger property as a part of your rehab project. So what does this do? If you're looking to buy a property for a short-term rental, a two-bedroom becomes an attractive option. You've got less competition from other investors, and it's still it's still a really good profitable option with the short-term rental model. So that's one market advantage. The other one we touched on a little bit earlier, and we have quite a bit of investors that are taking advantage of what's called a house hack. And so, especially if you are single, you're not married, you don't have kids yet, or you're just starting out, or if you're the other side, if you're divorced, and you've got flexibility in where your primary residence is or where you live, in acquisitions, the house hack is an interesting option. I've had one of my investor friends, he and his wife have done this. You don't have to be single to do it, right? But he and his wife did this strategically and ended up adding 10 properties to their portfolio by doing this once a year. So every year they would buy either a house that had a separate entrance basement or they could be made into a separate entrance basement, a duplex or a triplex, right? So a property that's got two separate dwellings within the same property. And so you basically buy the property usually as a distress needing fixing up. And so you're going to plan on living in one side. The other advantage of doing this is when you're buying the property as a primary resident, you can basically get a lot of the financing options for buying your primary residence that you can't get as an investor, which means lower down payments, sometimes better interest rates, things of that nature. So you're able to do this strategically, and if you happen to be in that bucket where you're flexible, that's a good way to get started. You may already have a property that is house hackable, that you are already currently living in that just needs a little bit of a conversion. And so all of a sudden now you're living in a property for free, right? Because you can generate revenue in the portion of the house that you are renting out as a short-term rental. And that monthly revenue basically can cover all of your expenses and then some. And so, like I mentioned, it's a good strategy to do with acquisitions because you've got that flexibility, especially if it's property that you're able to live in at the same time. Another market advantage with acquisitions is what I call problem properties, right? So what's a problem property? So you've got, again, in the traditional retail real estate market, fix and flipper or somebody trying to sell a recently rehabbed property are usually selling to families that are either first-time home buyers or they're upsizing, they're buying their next home, and they want to stay away from busy streets, right? The backyard noise, where you've got like a major highway that butts up into the backyard. And so what you will see is those types of properties will sit on the market on the MLS for a much longer time than the average. And these are perfect opportunities to come in and pick up as a part of your acquisition strategy because obviously as a short-term rental, it's a benefit to be on a busy street, right? If the average stay for your guests are 3 to 5 days, they're less concerned about from a family perspective, their kids kind of playing in the front yard. They don't really have the same needs and wants as a long-term retail buyer does, right? So the busy streets is less of an issue. Same thing with the backyard noise. They're not going to be in the backyard. They're usually traveling. They're there going out. They're not at the house that much. They will be outdoors hanging out, but the backyard noise is less of a concern. And so that creates kind of a niche as a part of your acquisition strategy that you can look at those problem properties that have been on the market for a while. You can negotiate a lower offer and be able to kind of get into those properties strategically for the purpose of short-term rentals, right? So one other example here is what I call basically hood houses, right? So a lot of the fix and flips that are done are still done in areas of transition, properties that are in still somewhat, high crime areas or areas where there's a lot of abandoned houses, houses that are boarded up, houses that have been burnt out, not rehabbed yet. You can still pick those up at a discount. You can still do the rehab, and you can definitely still be able to generate it as a short-term rental by doing the proper disclosure in your listing description. So that's kind of another kind of niche that you can strategically look after. Now, it's more so, I've had better use of that when it's become a fix and flipper that has not been able to sell their house because it is in the hood, right? And so you can step that in, you can step into that as an opportunity to manage the property for that investor that's not been able to sell it. And so that's kind of another angle with hood houses. All right, so the other thing I want to talk about with the acquisition strategy are the property types. All right, so obviously, your property types, you can basically, buy a traditional home, right? So your standard 3 or 4 or 5 bedroom home. Obviously, it could be modern build, it could be just regular. So that's obviously a good option. You can also do ADUs, right? Or accessory dwelling units is another way to strategically do acquisitions, and you can actually do it on the back lot of a existing property to generate additional revenue. Same thing with tiny houses. You can do a tiny house build for as low as 50,000, as high as 150. There are what they call like glamorous sheds nowadays, where you can basically put a shed in the backyard and kind of retrofit it as a tiny house. That can be much cheaper than 50,000, can be 25 to 30,000. Then obviously, if your goals and aspirations are more vacation-y, lake, mountain cabins, from acquisition standpoint, you could go that route as an option. I've talked about the lake house that we've done that generates, anywhere from $800 to $1,200 a night in rental revenue. And so obviously at a much higher price point than a typical rehab, but if that's strategically what you'd like to do, that's an option, right? You've also got luxury tents. Now, when I say luxury tents, and people that haven't really seen these, they are really, high-end kind of safari style, fully equipped kitchens, fully equipped bathrooms, AC units, king size beds. So they're all the proper amenities, but just happen to be in a luxury tent, usually somewhere near where there's some sort of an attraction, whether it's state park or lake or a mountain. Same thing with luxury tents. I'm sorry, luxury tree houses. You can generate, 250 to 300 bucks a night for some of those projects. Some people that have land, that's a good option to look into. The glamping has become quite popular. You can also look at RVs, mobile homes as an option. And then, of course, there's multifamily, right? So you can look at buying triplexes, quadplexes, smaller, mid-size 10-unit, 20-unit multifamily buildings for acquisitions. So those are all great options to look at. Obviously, a lot of us fall into this category. Traditional home, it's especially if you've already got experience acquiring and rehabbing and doing just regular types of properties. But there are also later on, there's also other interesting options you can get into once you get started, and once you kind of get the experience under your belt. All right, so the other thing I want to touch on for the acquisition strategy is what's involved with the process. Now, remember, if you guys have any questions, feel free to throw them in the Q&A, or, so you don't forget it. So we can cover that towards the end. So the process, basically, and a lot of you are kind of familiar with this already, right? So you have obviously you want to, once you've figured out your acquisition strategy based on all those different options, you want to be able to look at strategically prospecting for those types of properties. You want to be making offers, right? Now, as an investor, and a lot of you already know this, you can make offers basically contingent upon your due diligence period, right? You can make it contingent upon getting financing. You can make it contingent upon your business partner reviewing, right? So as an investor and in your acquisition strategy, be very comfortable making offers as long as you've clearly defined your due diligence period, which gives you an out to be able to recoup your earnest money in the event you find something during the due diligence period, or your contingencies are not met. So it allows you to back out of that deal without losing any earnest money, right? So it's a mindset thing as an investor. Once you've figured out strategically what type of properties you want to go after, you want to be out there making offers, right? And so that's kind of, you're not going to be able to have deals if you don't make the offer. Now, obviously, a big part of being comfortable making the offer is understanding your rehab budget, even if it's small, right? So even if the property doesn't need that much work, but it just needs interior paint or carpet or flooring, you need to have a good understanding of what that cost is, right? And so that piece is very important because it's obviously a bit your ability to get financing, whether you're doing hard money lending or private money, is all going to be based on your decisioning on the rehab budget. Now, equally important is your calculation of the ARV. If you're using a lender, a lot of times you're going to need to get an appraisal. And so before you get to that part, though, you're basically, as you come out of the due diligence period, there's the inspection period. Now, and which, by the way, when we work with our students, we help you and work with you every step of the way when you're making an offer, right? So as you make your offer, we're helping you with the market analysis, making sure you've got everything covered. We're giving you some pointers on what to negotiate for in your offer. Once you're in your due diligence period, we're actually helping you to confirm the rehab budget and making sure you do your inspection during that period. If there's any items that come up during that inspection, we kind of help you come up with strategies on either negotiating terms or having a good understanding of what those things are. So, for example, if you've got water damage or water intrusion in the property, and that's identified in your inspection period, well, how do you handle that? How do you get a quote for that? If there is evidence of foundation issues, how do you get that checked? How do you reach out to an engineer to do that? So all those different nuances, we actually help you through that process. Now, when you get your financing done, obviously the ARV is as important, if not more important than the rehab budget, that you do that correctly. And so we can help you with that as well. And then, of course, as you get closer to your closing, you want to get your insurance in place. We've got a lot of different companies we work with that include short-term rental operations as a part of the process. And so in a nutshell, that is kind of the main kind of walkthrough that you would need to do. And obviously, go to closing, get the property closed on, and then kind of get your rehab process started, and get it ready for as a short-term rental. Basically, the last and final thing on acquisitions, and then we'll kind of jump into some questions here, is, and we've touched on this a little bit in the previous example, right? But you've got cash flow and equity now, through the acquisitions process, right? So on a typical purchase, your monthly cash flow could be 1,500 to 4,500 plus. Obviously you're going to have appreciation of the property each year that goes by. If I could only spell, right? So you have that as your go forward, basically, ability from acquisition strategy. So 1,500 to 4,500. My net cash flow on my lake house, for example, was in the 15 to 16,000 range per month. But we also had a mortgage payment of 8,000, right? So it's all relative. But depending on the size of the property, obviously, and the purchase price, your typical rehab property, in that $300,000 to $400,000 range as a purchase price is going to be in this range as far as your monthly net cash flow potential on an acquisition, if that makes sense. So that completes my deep dive on the acquisition strategy. Let's see if we have any questions. So what does DSCR stand for? So DSCR stands for debt service coverage ratio, right? And so basically, what they're doing there is measuring the available cash flow to pay the current debt obligations, and not really paying attention to what your personal income is or your business income is. It's going to look at the ability of that property to generate cash flow, and to pay the current monthly loan. And so that DSCR calculation basically is done to determine how you qualify. And there's different lenders have different formulas for it, but they basically take your net operating income and then they divide it by your total debt service, and then that gives them a number that helps them determine your qualification in qualifying for the property. So that's also used in a lot of large multifamily deals where they're looking just at the income that property generates for the rental income in order to qualify and in the underwriting for the loan. So I hope that answered it. Any other questions before we move on to the rental arbitrage strategy? Okay. All right. So with rental arbitrage, I'm going to go through a similar detailed walkthrough for you guys. Right. So we want to start with, I think conceptually for a lot of investors, and I'm just going to touch on this topic first. A lot of investors have a hard time going after this opportunity. As investors, you're always taught, you want to buy real estate, you want to own real estate, you want to have control of real estate. So from my perspective as an entrepreneur and as a business person, yes, you do want to own real estate. You do want to be able to generate and grow your generational wealth and be able to pass that down to your grandchildren. But equally important is what's going on month to month now. As your income is directly impacted. That's great to buy properties and all the ebbs and flows of doing rehabs. And uh, you've got to have consistent monthly revenue coming in. So with the rental arbitrage model, the way I view this is you're investing in a monthly net cash flow, right? So you're basically investing in a revenue stream. You're controlling the property. You don't own the property, but you're controlling the property, and you're basically creating an asset and a business that will generate consistent monthly revenue over time. And like we touched on earlier, you can set your goals based on how many properties, how much monthly revenue you'd like to generate. So is this kind of the end all one all? I don't think so, but I think that's why it's good to have some diversification. It's good to be able to spend some time and effort and basically build out this particular part of your business to give you the comfort that you've got a monthly income coming in that frees you up to focus on other things like buying some of these other strategic types of properties, looking at vacation properties and so on. You know, take care of your monthly revenue goals and expenses first, and it kind of frees you up to do that. So like I mentioned, some investors kind of have a hard time wrapping their head around that. um, but once you kind of understand the value and basically creating that, there's very few businesses that I know of that you can, generate 10 to 20,000 to 30 to 40,000 a month in revenue without hiring a lot of people, having a lot of headaches, buying into a franchise or something of that nature, right? So um, you're able to do this without actually hiring people and having the hiring and firing and the whole headaches of HR and dealing with that, building a large company or a mid-sized company. You're able to build a process. You're able to outsource a lot of the day-to-day operation and delegate a lot of the work to outside contractors to kind of relieve yourself of that headache, but you're still able to generate that monthly and control and take advantage of that monthly income. So with that being said, let's kind of dive into um, some of the funding options, right? So with rental arbitrage, you are going to have, like I mentioned before, you're going to need deposit money, right? You're going to need first and sometimes last month's rent. You're going to need staging money. And then you're also going to want to have a reserve for some of those months where you might need to make sure that your monthly expenses are covered. Right. So all that being said, on a one bedroom, to be comfortable, you're going to need to be, all in for all of those things that I've just mentioned in the 10 to 12,000 range. Obviously, as you get bigger properties, you're going to need to be a little bit more. And so on, right? You get the idea here. So your net monthly income potential, right, based on how much money you need to get started is going to vary, obviously, for the size of the property, right? So a good rule of thumb on a one bedroom is in that $800 plus range. On a two bedroom, you're 1,200 plus, 1,400. Three bedroom, you're going to be 1,600 plus. Four bedrooms, you can very easily be in the 2,000 to 3,000 range, and so on. Five bedrooms or more, right? And so you can see just based on this high level math, your break even point is usually going to be about 8 to 10 months as a general rule, right? So it's going to take 8 to 10 months to recoup your initial investment of your startup expenses, your first month's rent, your deposit, your staging costs, and your reserve. Now, so in your planning stages, basically you've got that out of pocket expense in the beginning. By month 8, you've recouped that expense, and now you are looking at that monthly net number as pure profit after your expenses, right? So essentially, you're now after that first 8 months. Sometimes it takes sooner, sometimes it's 6 months, but I usually like to be conservative with these estimates. So call it 8 to 10 months. So the reason why we want to go after longer term leases is it does us no good to do a 12-month lease here if most of the lease we're going to be recouping our investment and we've only got a few months left at the end. So your term that you want to negotiate on these are usually going to be 24 and preferably 36 months for that reason, right? So you lock in your fixed rental amount for 24 months, knowing that your net profit number is basically going to come out after that month, that 8th month, right? So you want to have enough time to be able to recoup. Now, obviously, your initial term of 24 to 36 is still has a renewable option like other leases do. But what it does is it locks you into that fixed monthly expense for that 24 to 36 month period. A lot of landlords like that stability. So that's another carrot that you can wave when you're talking to landlords about rental arbitrage, right? So let's talk a little bit about the funding options. So, obviously, if you have liquid cash and you see the value in investing in this business to get that monthly cash flow set up once you've got everything put in place. Um, but most of us don't have 30, 50, 60,000 just laying around. And so there are different options to look at. Obviously, if you already have credit cards, right? You can access your credit cards knowing and have the discipline that 8 to 10 months you're going to pay those down, right? So you don't want to. I'm not encouraging people to just build up a bunch of credit card debt. Your intent is to basically use that as a revolver, so you can add more units as you go. All right. There are business lines of credit, and we actually have used in our business companies that specialize in at any given time. A lot of the different banks have promotions going on business lines of credit that they basically negotiate the different rates for you. It's not tied to your personal credit, so it doesn't impact your personal FICO score. And it's a good way to look at different promotions like 6 months interest free, 0% interest, things of that nature that allow you to kind of step into having access to, in a lot of cases, 50 to 100,000 in business lines of credit to be able to get this started. And so most of the time you are going to need they will look at your initial FICO score to pre-qualify you in the beginning. Usually a minimum of no lower than 640 to 680. But if you've got that minimum FICO score, there's definitely a lot of options we can look at with you to get those business lines of credit set up. It usually takes a couple of weeks to do it, but we've done that to grow our business when we first started with the rental arbitrage model, and it's a good way. Again, have the discipline to pay those down as you go. So as you add units and as you are getting your monthly revenue, make sure those business lines of credit get paid down so you can continue to reuse them, and you kind of just use them as revolvers. And so those are two good funding options to basically get started to generate your monthly revenue with rental arbitrage. So let's move on and let's talk about some of the market advantages, right? Similar to like we did with the acquisitions model. We can touch on some of the advantages with when you're trying to kind of look at different opportunities. Um, the same kind of concept here. So there are problem um, properties. Landlords might be having a hard time leasing out because they've got crime in the area. We've looked at properties that have had problems getting long-term tenants and have these huge vacancy numbers because every other weekend there's some shooting or something that's nearby, and they're not maintaining the pool. There's different things for the property and like an apartment complex that um, they're having problems putting in long-term tenants. And so those types of problem properties, as long as you go in without having inheriting some of those issues, they become potential good opportunities to do this. The other thing is our landlords that have high rent as an asking price, and those are sitting on the market. They're not getting rented. Uh, you know, those are good opportunities to go after. Nobody else is talking to them, and so they're open to having that conversation. You always with rental arbitrage, you always want to never pay more than what the market rate is, right? And so part of your market analysis, um, you don't want to overpay. So even though you're doing these leases and even though you're doing this as a business and you're conceptually going to be generating revenue higher than what the monthly lease is, you never want to pay more than that, right? So you still want to try to negotiate those down, but those are landlords that are going to be more eager to talk to you about a possible option because they've been on the market for quite some time. The other market advantage, no tenants are coming to them with a longer term corporate lease, right? So landlords like stability. So like I talked about before, you want to do 24 to 36 months, and they're not hearing that from other tenants or other people that are looking at their properties. Most people are looking at a 6-month or a 12-month lease. And so that gives you kind of an edge over being able to have that conversation, right? So the other thing, all the lower level maintenance you want to have control over. That's less of a headache for the landlord. They're not dealing with it, right? So, but it puts you in the driver's seat, allows you to control getting the toilet unclogged, having your handyman go there on the weekends to address any issues that come up for any guest stays and things of that nature. So the other thing is, which is kind of a selling point, property is in much better shape than with a long-term tenant, right? So if you think about someone that's been in a property for 2 years as a long-term tenant, let's say it's a 4-bedroom house. When they move out after 2 years, you're going to have to replace carpet, flooring, new paint, possibly new appliances. And as a landlord and as an owner of a property, that becomes a continuous cycle. And so with the short-term rental model, that same property over 2 years, even though we might have had hundreds of people coming and going, hundreds of families coming and going, every time somebody leaves that property and we have our cleaners go in there, our cleaners are professionally inspecting that property in addition to doing the cleaning. They're bringing to our attention any issues that need correcting. If there's a scuff on the wall, if a doorknob falls off, um, any defect whatsoever, we have our maintenance team on call to go correct those items. And so you can blink your eyes over 2 years and step away from that property, and it will be in much, much better shape than if it was a long-term tenant in there. If that makes sense. So that is that from the owner of the property's perspective. That is definitely a huge benefit, a huge advantage. And the other thing is this is a corporate lease. Um, we're going to set up the lease payments to be sent via ACH each month. And basically, in this recession environment, a lot of landlords are having to evict people. They're not paying them on time. And the ability to step into a relationship with a company like yours that is professional, that's running this like a business, they basically see a huge advantage in working with you. And as I've mentioned before, what this creates, all of these things, it doesn't take that long when you work with that first landlord, property owner, for them to recognize all these value, right? And so what they're going to do is they'll be able to, you'll be first on their list when they have other properties that have regular tenants that expire their leases. They're going to come to you first and give you the opportunity to engage. And that's why it's important to have your financing in line, because if you've got a $100,000 business line of credit and you've got an opportunity to take on 3 more units or 3 more properties from a current investor landlord relationship, you want to be able to financially be able to do that, right? So that's why it's important to get that set up in the beginning, is to be able to kind of take advantage of some of those growth opportunities, if that makes sense. So again, put any questions out there that you guys might have. Hopefully there's no questions because I'm covering this clearly and concisely, but I doubt that. So feel free to throw any questions out there that come up. We are going to take a break here in a little bit for about 10 minutes as we're going to be going for another hour and a half. We're kind of almost at the halfway point. So we're going to take a quick 10-minute break here in a little bit as we finish up on the rental arbitrage. And then when we come back from break, we're going to finish off with the management deep dive, and then we're going to get into the exciting stuff with the market analysis. So stick with me, everybody, as we dig through this here. So the next part of the rental arbitrage model that we want to talk about is the property types, right? So and remember, I'll make this available to everybody at the end. Let me just save this in case we have something happen. All right, so property types, as we've looked at, obviously, there's all types of single family homes that are out there and available for rent. There's all types of multifamily. Now, single family, like we've talked about, the 2 bedrooms is an interesting option, also with rentals. But we've also found that the 4 and 5 bedroom houses do very well with occupancy and demand. And so those are usually, if you're going into the single family, those are usually good targets to start off with. Yes, it's more startup money in the beginning. But as I've pointed out earlier, they are more profitable. It does take that same 8 to 10 months to recoup your investment. So if you're going after single family, I would recommend going after the 4 to 5 bedroom properties instead of the 2 to 3, just as a general rule. Multifamily, obviously, most of the multifamily are going to be your 1 to 3 bedrooms, studios as well, right? And so depending on the area, depending on the market, usually the studio and the 1 bedrooms are a good start. We have seen a shift across the United States with pricing being a lot more competitive with studios and one bedrooms, simply because there's a large number. There's a reason why people start with studios and one bedrooms. There's less properties to set up, it's less cost, and so there's a larger number of those properties in the market. So what does that do? There's a larger supply, and so it impacts your ability to be profitable. So be very cautious when you're doing your market analysis. It doesn't impact all areas, but there are some areas that have been negatively impacted by competition of people going back to hotels strategically, that have caused, in addition to the increased supply, that have caused lower revenue numbers in studios and one bedrooms. So be very cautious of that. Now, obviously, when I first started, I started out with 12 one-bedroom units. I started with a clean slate. And so I just looked at a heat map on AirDNA of where all the activity was, where all of the popular spots were for people to come to the city to enjoy, walkable to the parks and to the restaurants and to the bars. So if you're doing rental arbitrage, this gives you the ability to basically, figure out your target area based on where people are already being successful. So that's one way to do it. Obviously, you can do this in any market, in any neighborhood, in any suburban area. It doesn't have to be in the hot areas, but that is a good place to start usually, to see what the current activity is, to be able to kind of get started with it. So multifamily, the other thing I'll say about multifamily is, you've got your large multi-unit developments, that tend to be a little bit more problematic when it comes to doing the short-term rental model. A lot of them have key fob access or garage access, amenities that are potentially hard to commingle short-term guest stays with long-term. So the larger developments are usually a little bit more problematic to engage with. Not impossible, they still do well. I tend to gravitate to smaller and mid-size multifamilies. And so what do I mean by that? So there's 10, I would say 10 to 20 units, no more than 30 units, for a couple reasons. One, you have a better chance of dealing with the direct owner of a building if it's a mid-size, smaller multi-unit building. If it's a 300 plus or 200 plus or 100 plus larger development, you're typically dealing with a corporation or a large property manager, and you don't have that same relationship opportunity and building the ability to have long-term growth with that relationship. So typically smaller, mid-size multifamily unit buildings, you're going to deal directly with the owner or the property manager that has direct access to the owner. And that gives you a lot more control, and this particular concept is easier to kind of get across the goal line when it's that size of a property. A lot of the short-term rental master leases that we've done have been quadplexes, 8-unit buildings, 10-unit buildings, 27 units, 22 units, and so on. And so when you're looking and you're doing your prospecting, you're out there looking at different places for rent. That's where I would recommend you spend your time on if you're looking at multifamily opportunities. Much like the other option with acquisitions, you can also look at vacation opportunities, right? So beach properties, lake, mountain, right? So you can go look, don't necessarily have to be on the beach or on the lake, or the perfect mountain view, but if you are looking at properties that are for rent in those areas, you could be 2 or 3 blocks from the beach. You could be 20 minutes from the beach. You could be 10 minutes from the lake, and so on, for example, right? So we've had we at its peak, we had 20 properties, all 3, 4, 5 bedroom houses in Tampa, Florida, as an example. Um, Most of them were rental arbitrage. Some of them were managed properties from an investor that we partnered with. A lot of these properties are just regular neighborhoods in the Tampa market. Um, 25-minute, 35-minute drives to Clearwater Beach, St. Pete Beach. Um, and so people would come and spend, two to three to $400 a night to stay in a regular house, and they were fine driving 20, 30 minutes to the beach, right? So you don't necessarily have to be in the $2 million house and stumble through the backyard into the beach and with the view to be successful with short-term rentals. You can be just have access and look at markets that give access to that. There's Tybee Island, for example, Myrtle Beach, Panama City. There's a plethora of different kind of beach towns that present this as an opportunity. Jacksonville, Pensacola. So again, you don't have to physically be, so you can look at a regular rental property and basically be able to generate revenue because you've got folks that are going to that area and they're fine with driving that 20, 30 minutes to the beach. They don't have to be on the beach. So that certainly is an option for you. Now, I mentioned this before with the acquisition strategy, but you can also do the house hack with this too, right? So we have some investors that hop from place to place, and we have one of our students. She actually rents a 5-bedroom townhouse, and she rents 4 rooms out while she lives in one of them, right? And so she's generating enough revenue on that one house to pay her bills, and then also nets about $2,000 a month in revenue on top of that. And so the house hack option is certainly one way to go as well with rental arbitrage. Just pointing that out. So, all right. So those are your property types. Again, multifamily, go after the smaller ones. Single family, try to look at some of the larger properties as an option. And those are kind of my recommendations on property type. So let's start digging into with the process, right? With rental arbitrage, what's involved with the process. So, and then I'll dive into questions. So continue to put any questions you might have in the meantime, and then we'll jump on that here shortly. So your process for the rental arbitrage model. One of the very first things you want to do, we've already touched on this. Obviously, you want to have your capital and your funding set up, right? Whatever your strategy is there. You want to be able to set up a legal entity. You may already have a legal entity that you can use, but none of these master leases are going to be in your personal name. They all need to be in a company name. You can use one legal entity for multiple master leases, but you want to get that set up before you go start looking at properties. Okay. So we also there's companies that charge thousands of dollars, which I think is ludicrous to help set up a legal entity. This is something that you can do for free in most states. We show you how to do that if you don't already have one set up. And then you also want to tie a bank account to it, and you want to apply for your federal reference number for IRS. And so that all can take a day or two. That's a very quick process, and we recommend doing that before you get started. The other thing you're going to need are references, right? So quite simply, even if you've never done master leasing before, you personally have rented property, possibly. You've got some rental history. You've got some creditors that you have history with. So you can use, our clients use Diamond Edge Properties as a reference. So make sure you kind of think about, these folks you're engaging with are doing a corporate lease with you. And so they're less concerned about your income and about your personal FICO score. but you still have to define some sort of credibility behind what you're doing and what your experience level is. So think about that as far as who you want to put down as references. Um, when you're first starting out, uh, this is you can actually get away with getting started without this ever coming up. I think the first two or three that I did from scratch when I first got started, the question didn't even come up. But you want to have a plan for that as far as communicating what your track record is. Now, obviously, you're starting out with this. You don't have leases going up and running already. Uh, you know, you're obviously want to be crystal clear when you meet with these landlords what you're doing, what your objective is. There's nothing wrong with saying that you're starting in this market and you are looking to grow and expand. You're running this like a business, and the other thing that we've done with a lot of our students is they can use my company as part of a track record, right? So most of you I think are in Charlotte, so Diamond Edge Properties has managed hundreds of properties in Georgia and in Florida, and we're now expanding into the North Carolina market. And so that's one way you can position it. If you end up being a part of the program, that's one of the benefits that you can latch yourself to our experience and our history. When you have those first few uncomfortable conversations with the landlord, when those questions come up about your experience and your track record in doing this particular line of work and this particular model. One of the things that we provide in detail is a recommended lease addendum that you're going to require to be added to the lease agreement when you do these. And we give you like a very detailed outline of what to ask for. Just like in the acquisitions process, we want to make sure that even before you start negotiating these deals or start looking at them, you have a comfort that the market analysis is done correctly. And we're going to get to that part. But equally important is negotiating your terms, right? So on your lease addendum, we typically, as an example, make the argument that we usually pay a very low deposit, right? So the default for most landlords is they want the first month's rent amount or the monthly rent amount as the deposit. So we typically want to say, we're investing in staging and setting up the property. We're going to be putting electronic locks. We're putting outdoor camera surveillance. We're investing in improving this property. And like we've covered before, this property is going to be in much better shape than if you had a long-term tenant in it. So for us to put $2,000 or $1,500 into a reserve account as a deposit, really, we're better served using that money towards our startup expenses. So in some cases, we've been able to negotiate $0 as a deposit, right? But if you have to, we usually do a very nominal token amount of $300 or $400 as a deposit. The other thing you want to negotiate, which is critical, absolutely critical, right? I'm doing a 24-month lease. I want to shoot for best case scenario, getting that first month free. Now, why is that important? So I've already kind of outlined my experience with these landlord tenants or these landlord relationships is they're going to keep coming back to you with opportunities. Usually, once you get started after the first 2 or 3 months, if they come to you with 5 units that you need to make a decision on within a few weeks, or they're going to be putting long-term tenants in it, you're going to lose that opportunity. If you've got 5 units that you can stage and set up, you need to have a buffer of 30 days to get set up. It usually takes 2 to 3 weeks normally to set up a unit, even if it's just a 1-bedroom by itself. And so how can you do this at scale if you get the opportunity to get 5 of these all in one fell swoop, the only way to really take care of that opportunity at scale is to um, have some relief in that financial obligation, right? So if your monthly rent is $1,800, right? $1,800 on 5 units, and they want you to sign the lease next month, right? Before you even talk about your staging costs, that's $9,000, right? So where are you going to get the revenue from to pay $9,000 for the first month's rent due on the first of the month? So even though you're starting out usually with 1 unit, what tends to happen, and you guys know this just generally in business, when you negotiate something with somebody for the first time, the tendency is if you do more of those same transactions, you want to keep the terms the same, right? You want to simplify things. You don't want to have to renegotiate. So spend the time in the beginning to get it right, such that it gives you the ability to take advantage of opportunities that come up in the future. Because essentially, uh, if you don't have $9,000 available in your cash flow extra, you may have to turn down those 5 units. Now, had you negotiated in your lease terms, because you're going to want to rinse and repeat, oh, yeah, I can take on 5 more units. Let's just use the same terms that we have with our current lease. Sure. It's easy, right? Cut and paste. So now, because I have that first month free on 5 units, I can hit the ground running. I'm not coming out of pocket 9 grand to get started. I might have hopefully a $0 or a $400 deposit on each of the 5 units. I've got my line of credit to go stage those properties. And by that second and third week, and hopefully a little bit in advance of that, you are up and running and you've got your first booking. So, let's say October 1st is when the lease starts. You've got the first month free, so your first lease payment's not due till November 1st. Hopefully you get a little bit of advance access to the property before October 1st, maybe a week in advance, right? So technically, my goal is to, by October 20th, I want to be live, listing pictures taken, got my first guest checking in, and November 1st rolls around, and I've got $1,800 for each of those units because I've got a guest that stayed there for at least 5 to 6 days, or 2 different guests to generate that revenue. So now I'm off to the races in sync instead of me being in the hole besides my staging and setup costs. So I hope that makes sense in a long-winded way. Basically, it's better to kind of have that negotiation done in the beginning because you're going to be able to have the ability to be scalable and add more units quickly and be a little bit more financially comfortable to do so. And so that's a really, if you take nothing away from this section for rental arbitrage, that alone is going to save you and present a lot more opportunities to you than had you not pursued it in that manner. So that's a critical nugget. Make sure you kind of absorb that and make use of that going forward to help you be successful in growing the business. So the other thing that is of utmost important is you want to have a clear understanding of your monthly expenses, right? So just like on the acquisitions, we talked about the importance of your rehab budget, the importance of your ARV. In rental arbitrage, the same things hold true for having a good handle. You don't want to just back of the napkin on this, right? So what is your electricity cost? What is your internet cost? Don't take a guess. What is the actual number? How much is the water bill? Is the landlord including that in the lease? Is that a separate payment? All of your monthly expenses, pest control, is the landlord doing pest control? Are you doing pest control? If it's a single family house, who's doing the landscaping? What is the garbage pickup expense? Right? So if you're on a 4-bedroom house, let's say your rent is 2,200, right? So it's a bedroom house, rent is 2,200. You're going to have pest control, usually of call it $85 a month. You're going to have landscaping. Let's call it $150 a month. And then of course your electricity, 250, water, whatever that's going to be. You might have gas, and you definitely will have internet, right? So we recommend internet only. You don't want to do cable. Most robust internet services are going to be $90 to $100 depending on the area. And so you definitely want to factor that in there. You're also going to have supplies every month, right? We provide toilet paper, paper towels, soaps, all of the disposable items, water, bottles of water. So you've got a monthly expense with that. You will have a monthly laundry expense as well that you try to pass that on to the guests, but you will have a little bit of an overlay of that, right? So just in this one example, and it takes some time obviously to do this, right? But you want to take the time. So in this one example, I've got $85 for pest control, 150 for landscaping, 250 for electricity, 65 for water, 55 for gas, $100 for internet, 150 in supplies, 100 in laundry. So I'm at $955, right? Um, and so if your rent is 2,200 and your total expenses is 955, so your total all-in monthly cost is going to be 3,155, right? So you want to be very comfortable hanging your hat and having a good, clear, crystal clear understanding of this number here. As you look at your market analysis and you start to look at your profit potential, this number should be very close to being accurate. If it's not, if you're $200, $300 off, you could be making a bad decision on that opportunity. So just as equally as important on acquisitions, this is the critical important part on rental arbitrage, is you want to be able to have a clear understanding of the expenses. Okay. So finally on rental arbitrage, and then we're going to handle some questions and then take a quick break. So cash flow, income, potential, you're looking at on smaller properties, 800, and higher properties, larger properties, 3,500 plus, sometimes in the 4 to 5,000 range as well, depending on how large the properties are, how higher end they are. So that gives you the deep dive on rental arbitrage. Let's take a look at some of the questions that we have. One other thing on lease arbitrage, as we just covered these expenses and the importance of them, one of the things that we do in our program is I have a master lease calculator that helps you tabulate on each opportunity you look at, and it gives you some measurements by reviewing the opportunity to know what's a good deal versus a bad deal. So we give you a master lease calculator that basically helps with this analysis here so that you can kind of make good decisions on some of the prospects that you're looking at. Okay, so let's take a quick look at the questions here. All right, do you have a lease template for us to work from? Yeah, so I do provide a lease addendum. So what I recommend is, and this has worked pretty well for us, right? So when you have a landlord that's renting a property, they usually have their own standard agreement. Sometimes it's through a realtor, sometimes it's a standard template. So you don't want to try to force something on them that's different. So the way to do that is you keep their current agreement in place, and you basically ask them to attach your addendum or special stipulations to that lease, and we provide you with that in the program as well. And so that will give you your protection. There's a lot of things that are covered in there. We've talked about some of them here. Some of the other things are you want to make sure you have a 30-day notice out if there's any changes in the short-term rental regulations in that local market. So you don't get locked into a 3-year lease if all of a sudden you're not able to do short-term rentals anyway in that area because of the city or the county making a change. So that gives the landlord the ability to agree to allow you out of that lease if that were to happen, as an example. So there's things like that that are in there to protect you as a part of doing that master lease. Another question is where's the best to advertise House Hack or any of these? So you might need to elaborate a little bit on what you're meaning by that. Where's best to advertise House Hack or any of these? So I guess what you might be asking is where's the best place to look for House Hack opportunities? Just add a little bit more details there if you can for me on that one. And then I'll come back to it. So let's see, another question, and probably the cost of staging as well. So this is yes, so that is included in my master lease calculator is the cost of staging as well as a part of your calculation. It shows you how many months it takes to recoup your investment, and it kind of gives you kind of a quick way to do your analysis on each opportunity. Okay, another question, why no cable for TV? So a lot of the not all, most people that are traveling and using Airbnb and going in and out of these short-term rentals, they're typically fine with smart TVs and basically streaming services, right? So as long as you have internet at that property and you've got your smart TVs that you've purchased and set up through your staging, what that does is it negates having $150 to $200 as an additional expense to pay for cable. Now, there are people that might be there a little bit longer that might ask for cable, but nowadays the streaming services and apps, you can pretty much duplicate any channel that's out there by getting an app loaded on a smart TV and watching it that way. Most of the people that are traveling are comfortable with logging into Netflix, logging into Prime Video, logging into their streaming service, and they have their shows saved and their favorites saved, and so that's usually the way folks like to be able to do it. So it kind of, in the math that we just went through, there's $900 in expenses. If you put cable in there, it could be another $150 to put you over $1,000 in that example we just went through, right? So that's just one aspect that it solves for having an additional expense. Plus, there's no need for it if you have guests that are able to use streaming services. So that's kind of how we handle that portion. Okay, so we have another question. Do you need additional insurance policy if guest damages property? So that's a great question. And the Airbnb Resolution Center, you're going to handle most of your guest damages by getting reimbursed from their guarantee. So Airbnb basically has an insurance policy that they provide to you as a host that covers you in the event that the guest damages any of the property while they're during their stay. There are other insurance options that you can get that are out there, but 90% of the time you're going to be able to make use of the Airbnb coverage. We've done that for most of our claims, pretty much all of our claims. So that's usually the recommended way to cut down on your expense so you're not paying for additional insurance. You can get a short-term rental policy that covers for liability and some other things. That's recommended, obviously, if you are doing rental arbitrage and if you're managing to have that additional coverage and protection. But as far as the guest damages go, that usually is going to be handled for the most part by Airbnb's Resolution Center, which is another great reason to use Airbnb. So, all right, so it's time, I think, for a quick 10-minute break. I've kind of been jibber jabbering here. In our next part, I do have the same deep dive I'm going to do on management when we get back. And then we're going to dig right into the market analysis and kind of walk through some examples. Throw me an address in the Q&A section if you have a property that you personally are looking at or you would like to do a market analysis on, and we will actually look at those properties to do our market analysis and kind of walk you guys through how to do that. So between now and when we come back from break and as we're covering the management section, if you have any properties that you either own or have control over or you're just looking at, and you would like to see what the short-term rental revenue is, put that information in the Q&A box, and we'll make sure that we use those properties to do our analysis. So it's 12:02. Let's come back at 12:12 promptly to get started. If you guys need a bathroom break, grab something to munch on real quick or snack, and then I will see you guys here back in 10 minutes. All right. Hope everybody is back and ready to go. We are recording this, obviously, and so as a registered person, you'll get a copy of this recording. I will be going a little bit after 1 o'clock. I know we had our end time designated for 1, but I'm going to go as long as we need to go so that we can get through the market analysis and get you guys a good understanding of that. Hope so far that everyone's had, again, my whole objective here was to make sure I want to arm you guys with as much information as possible to help you in deciding what strategy you would like to go after and getting as much information to kind of help you make that decision. So hopefully this is helpful to kind of get you in that direction. The last strategy that I'm going to run through in a similar manner with some detail is the management strategy. And, obviously, as I mentioned before, it's usually preferable that if you go after this strategy that you've had some experience, obviously, either with your own properties or like we've talked about, doing a house hack or doing a basement or even renting out a room, just having some sort of experience with putting your tools and your integrations in place with your Airbnb listing. And so you typically want to have some sort of experience. It doesn't have to be extensive to get started with this. Now, one of the things that we, as a part of the B&B investing program, we do quite a bit of work with real estate agents. So in Georgia, I actually do a CE continued education class for realtors, real estate agents in particular. have a unique opportunity to come across this on a daily and weekly basis with their current clients. And so there's a lot of real estate agents, given the recent changes back in July with some of the changes in the way that commissions are negotiated, are looking for other avenue streams and other revenue streams. And so there are clients that I do get set up on this management strategy where they're not necessarily had direct experience themselves, but what they're doing is they're relying on Diamond Edge Properties and my experience to get them started. And so that is an option, just to let you know. You can go after the management strategy as an option, even if you don't currently do short-term rentals already. You can actually, we can arm you with everything that you need to know to walk you through this process. And as I go through some of these details, you'll kind of see a little bit more of what's involved with it. But, I'll take a step back and just make the comment that depending on, let's say you start with the acquisitions of the rental arbitrage strategy, it's always good to have this third strategy in your back pocket as an option. It's all about multiple streams of income, right? And so especially if you've got opportunities that come to you when you get started with this, where people that know that you have experience, they may end up having properties that they need help with, that it's good to have this as another option kind of in your toolbox, so to speak. It's nothing to sneeze at as far as the potential revenue. And with little or no out of pocket on your end, you're able to start generating 25% of the short-term rental revenue right out of the gate. And so, and then on a monthly basis. So this is definitely one to, at least before you decide what direction you want to go to, also having a good understanding of what's involved with this option. So with that being said, let's look at, when you're prospecting for different clients, what does that look like for management? All right. And so, one of the more popular ones, and this has been around for decades, is and we've touched on this in some of the other strategies, right? So you've got the vacation property types. Here, I just want to make sure. Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, so you've got the other vacation property types like we've talked about before. Beach, lake, and mountain. And usually these are the more profitable ones, right? And so if you can step into a property that's basically doing 15 to 20,000 a month in revenue, and you can earn 25% of that on one property, you're basically making as much as $5,000 just on one property per month. So it is an interesting angle, basically as a prospecting option to go after. We've got multiple properties on Lake Lanier, for example. I already talked about the ones in Tampa that aren't necessarily on the beach, but we've got properties on Lake Lanier right now that we manage for other investors, and these are $1 million houses that cost 50 to 60,000 to stage and set up. And we step in and run the operation and basically handle managing the property and earn that 25% rental management fee on there. So 4,000 to 5,000 a month in revenue just for one property. And so if you can see pretty quickly, if you've got a $10,000 a month as a revenue goal, it just takes 2 or 3 of these type of clients to hit that number pretty quickly. The other pretty common opportunity for this, or the type of client, are folks that are relocating, right? Whether they're new to the area, so they've either sold their house, they're moving into another one, and they want to do something with the house they're moving out of. They're for whatever reason they're not selling it, or they're just looking at having a second home and they want to keep the other one as a rental. Um, you've obviously got, other reasons: job, relocation, divorce. But you've got the opportunity to step in and help those folks with those properties as well. One of my favorites, and having been in the same shoes, um, you have long-term landlords that are burnt out, right? We've talked a little bit about this before on rental arbitrage. Um, they're evicting people. They're not getting their rent payments. They're having to constantly fix the properties up. And so this option to step in and give them another revenue stream that's going to have their property be in much better shape is definitely another prospect to go after in terms of being able to come in and show them the ability and the advantage and the value of doing short-term rentals instead of long-term rentals. Another big one, expired listings, right? So expired listings are typically properties that haven't sold because for various reasons, the seller might be overextended. They haven't been able to successfully sell it on the market. In some cases, the property might be listed for a year or longer. And so they are definitely a good candidate to look at alternatives if they have to keep that property and still have something that allows them to generate revenue. Another great opportunity, and a lot of you can relate to this, is real estate fix and flippers, right? There was a time, and this happens occasionally in the market with fix and flipping. You do this great rehab, property looks awesome, it's in a great area, and you put it up on with your realtor, get it listed, and you don't get it sold, right? Or you don't sell it right away. We've actually been able to successfully even fix and flippers that aren't in that situation yet, but want to be able to generate revenue. We've talked about some of the carrying costs that are involved with rehabs. So every month that goes by, it doesn't matter if you're rehabbing or not, or you're finished, or you're trying to sell, you still have a monthly interest payment to make and other bills to pay on a monthly basis. And so to step in, even as you finish your rehab for the investor, and you got to stage the property anyway, right? If you're listing it. So we've done this multiple times where you can come in and provide for that investor the option to help them stage and set up the property, but obviously stage it as a more fully equipped house to handle taking in guests with a fully equipped cash kitchen and supplies and towels and sheets and everything, with the ability basically to also list it on the MLS and manage your calendar around showings, right? So you're typically with short-term rentals going to have 3 to 4 guests a month coming and going. And so you can very easily coordinate your viewings around your checkouts and after your cleaners are done. And so what that does is if you have a property that needs to be on the market or happens to be on the market for 3 months, 4 months, 6 months longer, well, in the meantime, you've got a solution that's generating revenue while the property is listed for sale. And now that you've got an income stream for that investor, so that they're making income. Now, the other thing too, it gives them an immediate plan B if for some reason the property doesn't sell, like some of the reasons we've talked about before, and they end up deciding to try to keep the property, get it refinanced into a longer term loan, and then you just keep it. They keep it as a short term rental and long term. We've had many instances of that. So that particular strategy, and that's why I recommend, if you're going after this particular goal, is it's invaluable to attend a lot of the networking events like the meeting you guys have been at this week, and meet a lot of the investors that are that are doing fix and flipping and provide this as an option to them, because it's definitely one that is you can definitely take it, get a lot of opportunities that way. The other one that we've talked about already, that as a short-term rental manager, you can do a lot of networking with real estate agents. And so, real estate agents, for the most part, like most businesses, they want to stay in their lane. They're experts at what they do, with working with sellers and buyers. And you can provide this as an option for them to refer clients to you, that are in various stages of decisioning on whether they want to do short-term rentals or not, or they want to do it as a long-term rental. They just bought a property for somebody. They're looking at it as an investment. They want to look at options. So you can basically develop a network of real estate agents that you have a referral agreement with, where if they refer clients to you, that you end up managing their properties, you can provide a $500 referral fee to that realtor. And so the way that we typically position it is, we'll run the market analysis for your client. You make the introduction. If we end up engaging and managing the property for them after the first month's activity, we'll give you a referral fee of $500. And so, as you know, as a manager, usually your first month, or your monthly revenue at your commission level is going to be at a minimum $500. So you're basically just paying your referral fee out of your first month's management fee, right? So that works well. We get a lot of referrals that way, and it's another quick way to gain a lot of traction with a lot of different clients. All right, so let's move on and talk about the process with management. Right, so the process, not too unlike the others, but usually the starting point, and the ability to kind of look at this as an opportunity, is you're going to become the expert in running the short-term rental market analysis, and basically help that person decide if they want to do short-term or long-term, right? You're going to show them the difference, in order to help them make a decision on what route they want to take. Now, obviously, with short-term, you're getting bigger return, bigger money on a net basis every month after expenses, but you also have that upfront investment we talked about. So you do have to walk that prospective client through that information, right? So long-term rental, you're not staging it, you're not setting it up, you're not having to pay for monthly expenses for utility bills. You're basically getting it locked into a lease. You get that monthly lease payment and you're done. Short-term rentals, you still have to come up with that upfront investment. And so the reporting that you provide to them to help make them that decision kind of factors that in there, so they understand the same thing. It's going to take them X number of months to recoup their initial investment before they start getting their monthly net cash flow. So there's a process involved with how you do that and how you present that as an option. So with that in mind, you have to be able to understand how to develop a staging budget, right? And how do you determine on a 4-bedroom house, what is it going to cost and what's involved? What are the items that person's going to need? And so that's another thing we provide with our clients, is a full detailed list in Excel that you're able to manipulate and change depending on the bedroom count. And you can actually provide that to a prospective client, that also gives them a list of the items in detail, with links on where we typically buy items when we set up our units. And so not only is it a kind of a budget, but it's also itemized down to the detail level of all the items that you would need to set up your short-term rental. So equally important, ROI. How many months is it going to take to recoup investment? So you want to be able to clearly define that. Much like the rental arbitrage, you're going to need to demonstrate your experience, right? Some form of a track record with doing this. There's various ways, like we've talked about before, on how to demonstrate that. A lot of our clients, when they're managing properties, they can, as they're a mentee of Diamond Edge Properties or B&B Investing Group, you can kind of inherit the same track record and experience that we've had, because we're essentially teaching you based on our experience and our knowledge. And so you can kind of use that as your talking point for that. As equally important as the lease with rental arbitrage, you also want to have a clear, defined management agreement. That management agreement is going to clearly define roles and responsibilities. So what is the owner of the property responsible for, or the client? And what are you as the manager responsible for? So you want that clearly defined in your agreement. You also want clearly defined in there how often you're going to be doing your reporting, how often you're sending payments. Because when you manage a property, it's going to be, like I mentioned before, included in your existing operation. So you're the one that's going to be on the listing. The money for that reservation goes in your bank account. And so there's a process involved, basically, with reporting that back to the owner. And ideally, that report, which we also show you how to do and can provide you a copy of. There's a monthly owner statement that you have to send out. Right, and then that basically clearly defines, after all expenses, what your net number is that you have to send to the owner. And so that has to be clearly put in place. Most channel managers help automate a lot of what's involved with an owner statement, so we show you how to set that up as well. And that basically kind of gives you a good outline of the process. And obviously there's some ebbs and flows in there. There's communication back to the owner on key items, right? So you don't want to have to always constantly be updating them. You don't want to always be constantly updating them, but obviously, if you get any kind of major issues with the property that need attention, you want to make sure that they're updated of that to get it corrected, right? So a roof leak from the rain that needs addressing, anything like that that's kind of major, you want to make sure that they're made aware of that as soon as possible so they can address it. So that's a key component of it as well. All right, so let's talk about the cash flow, income potential with this particular strategy, right? And so, we've talked about the management report, so the market analysis. So you can charge anywhere from $250 to $350 as a short-term rental manager to run that STR market analysis, right? It's an expertise. It's something that even a lot of real estate agents aren't familiar with. And so the best way to vet potential clients in the beginning and to see how serious they are, you don't want to be running around spending a bunch of time running reports if you don't have someone that's serious about getting something done. So the way to vet out a lot of that noise is to have a payment that covers your time that it takes to run that short-term rental market analysis. And so one, it tells you how serious they are. Two, the way you can position this is that fee that they pay basically can be credited back off of the first month's activity if you end up managing the property. So it's kind of you get that reimbursed as a client, but it's a way, it helps them make a decision because they might decide to do something different, right? But it still allows you to make some income along the way. So that is one way to earn income. The other way is help them stage the property, right? You're going to be the expert at that. So staging and setting up the property, depending on the size of the property, you can charge anywhere from $1,500 to $3,500 to do that. A lot of the owners and investors that come to get your services don't want to have to mess with that part of the deal. So they want they want you to handle pretty much everything, right? So there's expense in the time that you spend to do that. So you should be compensated for that. That'll also be a part of the management agreement, which will be an option for the owner, right? So income potential, like some of the higher end properties are going to be much higher than this, but just as a general rule, your 25% management fee is going to get you in that, on smaller properties, $500 range plus into the mid-size to 2,500, and then as high as 4,000 on higher properties. So all in, that's going to be kind of your cash flow income potential on the management opportunity. So like I said before, wanted to arm you with at least a little bit more details on each of the different opportunities. And then that way it can help you, be comfortable with what your decision is as far as what direction you want to go in as you pursue this opportunity. So any questions out there? I see we have one. Why as a management do I need to do a staging cost for the owner? Right. So that's a good question. So if you've got an owner that's coming to you and they're looking for you as the expert for the short-term rental option, they're not going to know what's required to set that property up as a short-term rental. And so they're going to be looking for you to give them guidance on that. And so it's important that you have a good understanding of that and you're armed with how to provide that information, because basically that's a big part of their decisioning, right? So that's great. You can make 2 to 3 times the revenue on that property doing short-term instead of long-term, but there's some cost involved to get to that level to be able to stage and set up the property. So that's why it's important as the manager, not only to have the ability to explain that, but also have the ability to execute and stage and set up that property. Now, the exception to this, obviously, is people that may already have a property that's staged and set up. You might take on clients that have tried self-managing and they don't like it, and they want someone to manage it for them, or they've worked with another management company. There's some management companies that do this remotely that don't do a great job. They charge a 10 to 15% fee instead of 25%. So you might have some clients that you onboard that already have the property up and running as a short-term rental. You're just basically coming in to take over. So that would be an exception. But in most cases, when you're talking to a new prospect, you're going to need to know and have the ability to explain to them what's involved with the staging and the setup. So I hope that answered that. Is the cost of the staging just for staging, or also includes us having to buy the furnishings? So when I say staging and setup, I mean 100% of everything, right? So when you're looking at a management situation, all of those expenses are the owner's responsibilities, not yours. And so staging and setup includes your furniture, your electronics, your TVs, your electronic locks, your outdoor cameras, your dishes in the kitchen, the pots, the glasses, every single item that you need to have that property up and running and functioning as a short-term rental. The beds, the comforters, the decor items, all of those items are what's included in the staging and setup. So basically, everything that you need with an empty property to get it set up and ready to go and go live as an Airbnb listing and to get your first guest in there. That's what we're talking about, is having every single item accounted for to do that. And the cost involved to do that, obviously, if you're doing acquisitions and it's your property, then you're the one covering that expense. If you're doing rental arbitrage or a master lease, you're the one also covering that expense. But in the management option, the owner is the one that has to come up with that startup expense, not you. Just to be clear on that point. So Is the 25% fee going rate for the Charlotte region? Yeah, so the 25% management fee is a pretty generalized standard fee across the board in most markets across the United States and in most places across the world, frankly. Um, the average is in that 20 to 25% range. There are some markets, like some beach and possibly lake markets, that are a little bit higher. And sometimes in the Caribbean, it could be in the 30 to 40% range because there's a lot more, local things that need to happen with maybe you're providing personal chefs, you're doing a lot, you're picking up the person from the airport. So there's other things involved in certain markets that might cause that fee to be higher. But as a general rule, the going rate to manage a short-term rental is 25% across the board in most markets in the United States. All right, good. So that concludes our deep dive into the three different strategies. So I hope you guys have a good understanding of what's involved. Um, as I mentioned before, I'll put this font size down a little bit to a more acceptable level, and I will email each of you that have registered a copy of this Word document. That way you have it, and you can refer back to it as needed. The last thing I did want to touch on before we move on to the market analysis, and I've kind of sprinkled in here and there how the B&B investing program helps. But I'll cover that after we do the market analysis. So we'll do the market analysis now, and then we'll do a deep dive into how the B&B investing program helps. So let's see, we did have one address that we wanted to use as our prospective property. Let me use that. So as I'm moving over to the market analysis, if there's any other questions that you guys have on the three different strategies, feel free to throw that in the Q&A for us right now. And if not, we will move on. All right, so all right, a good starting point to do your market analysis is going to be AirDNA. And I'll provide a link to everybody on getting like a 30-day trial with AirDNA so you can kind of play around with it. AirDNA, it has like a subscription fee that's monthly. They used to do it based on the market, but now they do it essentially. It's a flat rate for full access to all markets across the world. So if you're going on vacation, you're traveling, or you're looking at other markets, you can look at markets across the board by using AirDNA. So the first thing you want to do, and I'm assuming, and I think this is Yasmin's property. Yeah. So the very first thing you want to do when you start your market analysis is you want to confirm your bedroom count, right? So whether you're buying a property or leasing it or managing it, before you even do your market analysis, you want to confirm the bedroom size, right? So if you notice, so on AirDNA, you can do searches based on markets, general markets and submarkets, but you can also search for a particular address like we're doing now. So we can do our market research. Now, if you notice, the default is tied into tax records, and sometimes they try to guess the number of bedrooms. So the very first thing you want to do is make sure you've got your bedroom count correct. Your number of guests is usually going to be based on 2 guests per bedroom. So in a 2 bedroom, you want to say it's 4 guests. And then you also want to confirm, basically, besides the bedroom count, you want to make sure that your bathroom count is correct, right? And so when I pull it up on Zillow, it's showing 2 bedrooms, 2 bath. Now, obviously, with a short-term rental, especially when you start looking at 3 and 4 bedrooms, if you have 1 bathroom, it's a little bit of a hindrance. So it is a benefit that you actually have, 2 bathrooms instead of 1. And so assuming that Zillow is accurate here, we're going to do that. So 2 upper bonus rooms unheated over total square foot is 1,700. Okay, so there's 2 upper bonus rooms that are unheated. Okay, so that's good to know as a part of our strategy here, because you can utilize that space. We've done short-term rentals where we've done bonus rooms as game rooms, or garage as a game room. So you can do ping pong tables, you can do other types of air hockey, other types of games, pool tables and so on. So when you've got unheated space that's like that, it's usually good to include that as a part of your strategy. So just in general. So just to kind of give you a walkthrough on AirDNA, obviously a lot of this is self-explanatory, but what they're doing is they're giving us an annual projected revenue, your annual occupancy, and your average daily rate, right? So if you do the math here at 41,000 a month, 41,000 for a year, is based on $189 at a 60% occupancy level. So $189 times 30 days times 60% is about $3,400, right? So $3,400 times 12 is 41,000. So you're looking at a gross rental income of $3,400. Again, AirDNA is a good starting point. It basically is not doing any type of separation for us. It's not looking at all of the different 2 bedrooms and saying, hey, these all look very similar to your comp property. It's basically showing us the numbers for all of the 2 bedrooms in the area, right? And so over here, it shows us where our property is in relation to the other properties that are doing short-term rentals, right? And so the numbers that they're presenting in that first screen is giving us a summary. So all of these other properties, as you can tell, are kind of all over the place, right? So 33,000 a year, 25,000 a year, 50,000 a year. There's one here for 3,800 a year. Okay. And so the objective here is, if we're looking at buying this property or leasing it or even managing it for somebody, we need to go through and understand from these comps which ones are very similar to our comp that lets us know, is that 40,000 too high or is it too low, right? So should we be 25,000? Or should we be 17,000 or should we be 50, right? So it's a pretty big swing between those differences. So when I talk about using AirDNA as a starting point, that's what I mean. You really have to drill down. And so this tool does give you that ability. You can do calculations on your operating expense and come up with a cap rate and things like that. But usually you want to look at your comps, right? So it provides you with the comps here. And it also gives you some of these stats that you can look at for projected revenue that help you come up with what that looks like. Now, remember, all of this information that we're being presented with here is based on all of these different properties that are all over the place in terms of numbers, right? So it's just showing us an average. Doesn't help much in making a financial decision, but it gives you a good starting point. Now, what you want to do is start drilling down and looking at the comps. Now, when you do that, let's see here, somehow. All right, looks like I need to go back to pulling the property up. It's giving me the market. Okay. All right. So just as a reminder, all this stuff has to be correct up here for you to be looking at the right comps, right? So, all right. Now, if you notice in the comps that they're presenting to us, and that's again the reason for some of these differences, they might include, even though we're looking at a two-bedroom, they're including three bedrooms and one bedrooms, right? So that's kind of the first thing you have to weed out. I don't really want to compare a one bedroom to my two bedroom. I don't want to compare a three bedroom. I just look at two bedrooms. So it's not carefully, making sure if there's not a lot of two bedrooms, they're going to throw in whatever comes close, right? But there's at a minimum. All right, hold on. As you can tell, this thing is a little finicky when you touch on certain things. All right, it's kind of kicked me back to the general market again. Here, let's see. It could be the way I'm looking at this on the screen for the presentation that keeps pushing me out here. But let's redo it here. So we do have enough two bedrooms here, I think, to look in more detail, right? So when you're looking at your short-term rental analysis, it's very similar to when you are buying a property and you are looking at your comps, right? So it's a very similar process. So what you want to do, and we kind of know the look and feel of this property, right? It's a four-sided brick, nice solid bones. Now, assuming these pictures are what it currently is, but obviously you want to be looking at accurate pictures. Property looks like it's in pretty good shape. The key thing you want to pay attention to, not much unlike when you're doing your investing for real estate, is you want to take a close look at your kitchens and your bathrooms. I don't think I saw any bathroom pictures, but you just want to have a good understanding of where it is modern wise. So when you're looking at your comps, what to compare it to, right? So let's look at this first two bedroom here. One of the key things you want to look at that's provided. This shows me that this listing's been out there. It's a 5-star review, right? 135 reviews. So this property has quite a bit of history. So if you click on that property, and I want to make sure you guys are seeing this other pop-up window. I'm not 100% sure on the share screen, but you should be now looking at a STR listing overview of that 1-2 bedroom I just clicked on that's got 135 reviews. That's at 19,000 revenue. So just put a yes in the Q&A for me. I just want to make sure that you are seeing the same screen on your screen that I'm currently looking at. All right, perfect. Thank you. So once you drill down, obviously we can look at the photos on this listing to compare it to our comp. We can, this guy's been out there for, well, we can look at a 2-year, up to a 2-year history on here. So it shows us the occupancy level. So once you're comfortable that the comp, and I don't think this is a good comp, we're going to look at another one, but I'm just showing you what the exercise is, right? So this is a log cabin. Ours is a 4-sided brick, so it's probably not a great comp to look at. These numbers aren't that great anyway, 52%, $100 average nightly rate. But just to show you what's available to look at. So this is a great thing to look at because it's showing me their real-time that listings calendar, right? So not only is it telling me the historical, what it's done historically, but I'm also able to take a snapshot and see what is going on this week. Okay, they don't have any, they're not booked for this weekend. Actually, no, I'm sorry, I take that back. This blue, the blue color is showing you that it's been booked. So they have a guest that's staying there all of these nights at that price. You can go forward into the future into October. So it looks like they may have had a longer term guest that's been there for part of September and going into most of October. And then the rest of this is available, right? So no one else is booked yet. So as you look at your comps, and in November, they've already got a couple bookings done, which is pretty good to be that far out. December, nothing yet, right? So it gives you a sense of the activity and the pacing in the market by drilling into their actual calendar without having to kind of go through the nuances of looking at the Airbnb platform. So that's kind of what you want to look at when you pull up the individual listing. I'm going to go back to, let me see, maybe this does it here. Yeah, I don't know why it keeps pushing me out, but let's keep going back in. So my whole objective in spending time to look at the comps is obviously finding the comp that is closely matched to my prospect property, and then diving into the numbers and the history for that property. So I think this other one here, we have this other 2-bedroom, 2.5 bath that might be more closer matched. So they've got 38 reviews and a 4.8 average. You can actually change this to look at revenue compared to daily rate, compared to occupancy, right? You can change this to the number of years. But usually if you look at the last 12 months, gives you a good indication. So 59% average occupancy. Let's take a look at their calendar. Now, these lines in it typically mean that the property wasn't available or the owner blocked it for various reasons. This shows us the bookings and what the prices were in blue of those bookings that have already happened for the month of October so far. November. So as we're doing this, and let's, for argument's sake, say that we think this is a pretty good comp, you can kind of make a note of the 135 and 59% as one that you would say is a potential comp, and you want to keep track of maybe 3 or 4 of them as you go through this to keep track of what your average is going to be. Now, one of the things to pay attention to is the days available. Now, obviously, there's 352 days in the year. The days available here is only 197. That can mean a couple of things. Either the owner is not making it available 100% of the time, or it's a new listing and it's just been available for that many days so far. So just pay attention to that one. The other thing is if you've got a low number of reviews, then there's not that much history and not that much traction. So I tend to want to gravitate to the ones that have more reviews to pay attention, more close attention to those. Now, the next thing you want to do, okay, there's a comment, rates are all over the place. Do we need to put in the rates for Airbnb, or is there an automated program that does that? Yeah, so there is another platform that I typically recommend using that is one of the price optimization tools. And so I do a training on Price Labs, and I'm going to put a link in the I'll send a link when I send the Word document to everybody for Price Labs, because Price Labs does a deeper dive than AirDNA, and it allows you to do just that. It allows you to create your comp set. It allows you to refresh it, so then these summary numbers are then updated based on your cherry picked comp. And so Price Labs is a tool that I definitely would recommend looking into for refining this process. I'm really just showing you the nuts and bolts of the process of what you should be doing when you're doing your market analysis. But you can still do that without using Price Labs, but Price Labs does give you a more meaningful end result. But the next thing you want to do as you look and find your comps and you're comfortable, you obviously want to do a kind of a thorough look through of all of the pictures. You want to make sure that your kitchen is of similar quality, your bathrooms, the finishes, and so on. But what this also does, though, before you even set that property up, now this is a townhouse, right? So you've already got a benefit over the townhouse as far as not being a true comp. But it gives you a sense of what your competition is staging. These are not great. I wouldn't say, it's a good attempt, but these are fairly basic, furnishings and decor items, so nothing crazy. So it gives you a good indication of what your competition is. Now, the other thing you want to be paying attention to is looking at the reviews, right? So the reviews will talk about when I'm looking at a property for the first time, especially in an area that I'm not that familiar with. I want to see if anyone's commenting in their reviews about the location, about the neighborhood. Is there complaints about them not finding the place? Is there complaints about crime, homelessness? So you want to kind of be, especially if it's a property you're about to make an investment in, to buy, or to do a master lease with. So like, here's a review. It's a perfect location to everything. We went to the outlets, restaurants, and blah, blah, blah. The place was in the right location. Very quiet neighborhood, peaceful people around, blah, blah, blah. So you want to look for any red flags in the reviews that might indicate a consistent problem that would, obviously, if it's impacting listings in the area, if you start your listing, you're going to probably have similar things. So I'm less concerned on looking at these reviews of how they reviewed the host and that property. It's more about what's the area, what are they saying about the area, right? So you want to peruse that as you're refining. Here's very convenient to a variety of food establishments, gas stations, retail stores, and so on, right? So this allows you to just get an insight. I mean, they've had 38 reviews. This has probably been over the last, year and a half. So it gives you an immediate finger on the pulse of what's been going on in that neighborhood, in that area, right? And so definitely spend some time doing that. Besides, so once you've kind of narrowed down things that you think are good comps, do a deeper dive, look at the reviews, and do that analysis to make sure that you're comfortable with what that looks like. So it's not rocket science, but like I mentioned, when you pull this up for the first time on AirDNA, you've got all these other properties. So the whole objective here is to narrow down, choose between 3 to 5 comps, so that you're able to, basically come up with a number on your nightly rate and on your occupancy that you're comfortable with. And this allows you to further be a little bit more comfortable. Not only that, but paying attention to what's actually happening in the market in the next 30 days, in the next 60 and 90 days, just so you can get a sense of what's going on, right? So let me pull up one of our reports. So the whole objective here basically is to be able to as you refine your comps and as you look at on your comps the seasonality, obviously there's some seasonality, some months are higher occupied than others. Let me reset my screen here for just a second. Actually, if you guys could give me just 2 minutes, I'm going to be right back here. I got to reset something on here. All right, sorry about that. I had to get us to another file here so I could pull it up. All right, so everyone's still with me? Once you've refined your analysis, now it's important. One of the other things, let me point this out real quick before I get into that. One of the other things that's a good way to just do a quick sanity check, right, is besides AirDNA, on the Airbnb platform, we can basically put your address on Airbnb and on the Airbnb platform directly, all right? And so even as you're looking at properties, or if you're just kind of looking at prospects, one of the quick things you can do is just throw the address that you're looking at on Airbnb. And this is helpful too if it's a property that's for sale, and they may already have it up and running as an Airbnb, right? So you don't want to really put any particular day or dates. You do want to try to be consistent with the number of guests, and then hit the search button. All right. So remember, AirDNA is looking at scraped data, capturing historical information. It is a little bit of a delay in terms of when this information is published on the AirDNA platform. The other thing is AirDNA might include listings that no longer exist. There are people that just kind of throw out Airbnb listing to just rent a room out and then they pull it down later, or they leave it on there. So it's kind of like a cluttered process. So when you go directly onto the Airbnb platform, this basically shows you, what's going on right now, right? So if you search for that address, it shows you on the map right? Where your property is. So it immediately tells you in real time today, like where are the other options near my property, right? And you might end up looking at some properties that you don't necessarily see in your comp list on AirDNA, um, and because it's not an exact science. So it's just another sanity check to see, what are the other properties looking like, and so on. And this is also a good representation of if I'm a guest looking to stay somewhere right now, what else am I looking at, right? And so how do these finishes compare to what I'm planning on doing in my property? How does the bathroom look and the kitchen look compared to mine? And so it just gives you kind of a quick snapshot of what the rest of the market is doing. And you can also, obviously further drill down, look at this also shows you the number of reviews, and the review rating, right? Like we talked about before, the higher the rating, the better you're going to do. All of these are close to 5 stars. And so this just amplifies the importance, guys. Like I just did a random search for this area. There's nothing on here that's less than 4.9, right? There's one 4.86. But if you all of a sudden, and it doesn't take that many bad guests experiences to get a 3 or a 4-star review, you're not going to be on the first page. So I just want to point out, like if we go to page 15, you've still got pretty solid high reviews here. So you really got to have your stuff together to be competitive on this platform. All 15 pages have, the lowest one so far is 4.6, right? So it just further demonstrates the importance of having that 5-star review. So let me finish the thought process here. So, I'll remind you, Price Labs is another tool besides AirDNA that you can definitely do a deeper dive on. I have a whole separate training on the Price Labs platform that allows you to custom create your comp set and basically provides you with an automatic summarized report. I will send you guys an example in the email I send to you of what that report looks like, so you can get a sense of how that data is presented. And it looks like a lot more data than what we're currently reviewing. So it gives you a lot more details. For example, what are the cleaning fee averages in the market? What is the average booking time? There's a whole lot of other stats, especially if you're making a buying decision, that are important to know. So I'm going to send you a copy of that report so you can see those details. But the whole objective here, right, is once you have confirmed, on this report, I've got the 3 comps after doing that legwork. So I'm comfortable that these 3 comps are very similar to mine. And I'm taking my average nightly rate of those 3 to come up with the average that I want to do for my property. And then that average, I usually like to be conservative, right? So in this example, I'm saying I'm not going to do the 625. By the way, this is a 5-bedroom, right? So I'm going to do a conservative estimate as a $500 average nightly rate. 5 bedrooms sleeps up to 10 people. And so you want to put in what your seasonality is. Usually in most markets during the spring and summer, you're going to be higher occupancy levels. In the winter and fall and winter, you're going to be lower, right? And then your average for the full year. And the same thing with your nightly rates. In most markets, your busy times are going to have a higher nightly rate, even as well as higher occupancy. And so you want to make those adjustments based on what you're seeing your comps are doing in that manner. Now, this particular report is used usually for management clients. You can also use it when you're doing acquisitions. But if you notice, I'm showing the gross revenue, then the management fee, and then the net to the owner. This is the report that shows the owner the comparison to doing the yellow is long-term rental at 3750, and it just shows the net number above what they can make as an option to do short-term rentals. They're doing 58% more money net back to them to do short-term instead of long-term. And so that's really kind of the end game, is to get your 3 properties that you're very comfortable with, that you can hang your hat on, and then do deep dives on those 3 properties to understand how they look and compare to your subject property. So do we have any questions on the market analysis? Okay, no questions on the market analysis? All right, so I'm going to conclude here and walk you guys through just a quick overview, like I talked about on the B&B investing program. And so, we do have an option for a more deeper, coaching and consulting that B&B investing provides. And basically, this program is kind of limited to a certain number of folks. We usually have two spots available each quarter. I usually like to keep a more smaller, intimate group to make sure that we are, at the end of the day, getting results with our clients. And so we typically want to make sure that if some of you, what we've just covered, and each person learns and kind of gathers differently. I value the value in coaching and consulting. I've actually probably spent about $50,000 over the years on different coaching programs for rehabbing and other parts of real estate. So I see the value of paying for experience and knowledge. And so my objective with the B&B investing program is, first of all, make sure that you're a good fit, right? The program is not a good fit for everybody. If you just want to set up a couple of short-term rentals and want to have, another revenue stream, the program may not be the best fit for you. What I've just provided you might be a great starting point for you to kind of get your 1 or 2 units set up. But if you're looking to really scale a business, generate consistent monthly revenue, have goals and plans to hit your monthly revenue goals, and you want to be aggressive about it. You have the time and the ability to focus on it, and you want to invest in getting started and kind of hitting the ground running. Perhaps you want to get to 20, 25 properties, for example. Most of our clients are doing 5 to 6 properties very quickly within 6 months. But we want to make sure that you're a good fit, because I don't want to have your time and our time if ultimately we're not kind of singing off the same song sheet. We've got the same goals, right? So my whole objective with the program is we want to be able to work with you. You're going to have some one-on-one coaching with me, right? And along the way, all of those milestones, I'm going to be there to help you, right? So doing the market analysis, negotiating the contracts with the acquisition or the lease or the management. Each step of the way, we'll do a one-on-one to make sure before you sign any agreements or do anything long-term that I'm there to help review that process. The whole goal here is in 90 days, we want to have your first property up and running, generating revenue, right? And so in the beginning, I'll work with you to confirm which strategy you'd like to do. We usually recommend choosing one strategy for the first 90 days. And then our goal is to get you up and running on that first one in 90 days. And then we're going to lay the groundwork basically to add more units after that. So besides the one-on-one, we also have a weekly training call. And so on that weekly training call, and that's why I typically don't like having, we kind of limit the number of people that are part of the group, um, is each week I'm going to check in with you and see what's going on that week. You know, what are you experiencing? What challenges are you seeing? Are there certain prospects you're having issues with? You need help with having overcoming a landlord objections, or there's something going on with an inspection on an acquisition. Whatever it is you're experiencing that week, we're going to cover on that weekly call. We also have email support. And so I also have a online component to this. So there's online training that you'll be going through at your own pace. And so as you're going through that online training and details, if you have any questions along the way, you can put any questions in the email, which come directly to me to respond to. But we also handle those questions on the weekly training calls as well. I also have a client-only Facebook group, right? So once I know what your target market is, what your strategy is, we actually provide other options for you, off-market deals, other rental arbitrage deals that we're looking at that you might be interested in to participate in as well. So we do that in the client-only Facebook group. The other part of the training, like we've talked about, I'm going to give you the master lease addendum. I'm going to give you the management agreement that we use. We also have the pricing setup staging list in Excel. Basically helps you get the properties staged and set up. We have the master lease calculator. We have the 12-month forecast report on how to set that up. The other thing, all of the weekly calls are actually recorded, so you'll have access to the replay of that. My online training is also part of an app, so you can listen to a lot of the training while you're driving, as similar to like a podcast. And then all of my weekly Facebook Lives that I do, you can do a search on different property types and listen to those as well. So it's meant to really be kind of an all-encompassing resource. So again, the B&B investing program is not for everybody. If you are looking to kind of get aggressive with this and build a business, the next step would be is we can have a strategy call, and I'll spend some time with you learning and understanding what your goals and objectives are. And on that Zoom meeting, we can kind of develop a plan for you and confirm if this program is a good fit for you or not. And would happy to spend some time with any of you guys that are on this call today. So in the email that I send out at the conclusion of the webinar, there will be an option for us to schedule a Zoom meeting, and we can kind of look at your particular goals and your objectives and see if this is something that would be a fit for you. So that's optional, obviously. If you feel like this is an option you'd like to get more details on, we could definitely do that. So I hope this was helpful for everybody. Please put in the Q&A if you got a benefit out of this, and feel free to give me any direct feedback on how you like the training, or if there's things that we can improve on. So thanks again, everybody, for jumping on. I will also send out the replay for this. Each of you will also get an email with the Word document that we've been working on for the day. I'll also send you the links for AirDNA and for Price Labs. And then if you haven't yet already, please join my Facebook group, and you can also kind of keep posted there on different things that we're covering in the short-term rental space. So again, hope this was helpful for everybody. I know we went a little bit over on the time, but I wanted to make sure that we got everything covered. And so look forward to chatting with some of you on the strategy call, and then we can kind of learn a little bit more about what you're trying to accomplish and see how we might be able to help. So thanks again, everybody. and have a good rest of the weekend.